Hey everyone, just wanted to take a moment to thank you for listening to the show. We're thrilled that you're here and enjoying the content. This podcast is completely free for you, but if you'd ever consider supporting the show, we truly appreciate it. One way you can do that is by using our affiliate links. These are links to products and services that we've mentioned on the show. And if you make a purchase through one of them, we might earn a small commission at no extra cost to you. It's a great way to show your love for the podcast and help us keep creating awesome content.
Blah, 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 blah.
Welcome to the Our Forever Smiles podcast, a podcast created to support mothers of children who were born with clefts and those who love them. I'm your host, Laura Arroyo, and I'm also a mother of a daughter who was born with a surprise cleft palate. I know the challenges you face every day. Whether you have just learned the difficult news of your baby's cleft lip or palate, you're in the midst of pre-op or post-op, or you're an OG cleft mom, this podcast is for you. In a weekly conversation, we will talk about everything from feeding and speech therapy to surgery and school. We'll share tips from guest experts and advocates, and even share a little joy in the process. You can listen to Our Forever Smiles wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned. Hello, and welcome back to the Our Forever Smiles Cleft Mom Diaries and Support Podcast. I am Laura Arroyo. Before we jump into this episode, I would like to invite you to join this community to hear conversations with other cleft moms and advocates that will help you feel supported along your journey. All I want you to do is to click on the Facebook group page that is linked in the episode notes. You can speak directly to the guests from this podcast, ask questions, and talk to a community of cleft moms that are eager for answers, but also willing to help. As a note, we are not medical doctors, and we don't intend for you to use the information that we share here as medical advice. We are parents and advocates who love our children, and we are sharing our own personal experiences. So, I had a pretty great day today. I actually recorded an episode with Cassidy, who is the host of the Every Smile Has a Story podcast. So you all can look forward to that episode being released on her platform. It is really nice to be able to collaborate with other people that are doing this work in this space and raising awareness about the cleft journey. We'll have Cassidy on the podcast to share her connection to the cleft community as well. So look out for that. But I'm also thrilled to have the opportunity to speak with our next guest, Aliese. Aliese is a stay-at-home mom. She has a 3-year-old, almost 2-year-old, and a 6-month-old. I feel like all these moms that I talk to have all these young kids. Oh my goodness, I don't know how you all do it. But she's here to share her story and her personal journey. So welcome, Aliese.
Hi, it's good to be on.
I really appreciate you sharing your story with us, and just, I feel like a big question that people have upon diagnosis is if they are going to be able to breastfeed. So I was so happy that you're willing to speak about this topic. But I want to start from the beginning. So when did you find out about your baby's cleft?
Yeah, so we found out very early. It was the 20-week anatomy scan. So they caught it like right away. We were not surprised at all.
What was your reaction to that, finding out the news?
I think grief. That was, and I didn't want to be like, oh, I'm so upset because my child is going to be born different. But I think there was grief in so many aspects, and I didn't know how to name that.
Yeah. No, I feel like it's really hard. And you feel like you want to feel this, all these feelings, right? But it's so weird. It's like you don't want to you feel guilty for overdoing it or something.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It's this odd thing. But yeah, tell me, so this is, your last baby, your 6-month-old is your baby that is cleft affected,
Yeah.
right? So you've had 2 pregnancies before that. And from what I can tell, those pregnancies were normal,
Yes.
quote unquote, normal pregnancies, right? Okay. And so, as you're going in for that anatomy scan, is it just like routine as usual? Is that how you're feeling? Like, tell me more about that day.
Yeah. So we were super excited. We have 2 boys. And so we were expecting a 3rd boy going in. And she told us it's a girl. We were super excited. And I was planning a home birth at that time. So I had a midwife. And so she had sent us to a facility that does ultrasounds. And she called me like later that day and was like, hey, they picked something up on the scan. I don't know if you know anything about clefts, palates, and lips. But I just wanted you to know that they did pick up something. And she was really good with like, how are you feeling? Do you need time? Do you want to talk about this? So she really just gave me that space to feel things and process.
Yeah, so I also had a midwife as well, and they sent me, they didn't send me anywhere. It was like down the hall, but it was a different facility that does the ultrasounds and stuff. And so I went down there, and then they brought the scans back to them the same day, and she was able to take a look at them as well. My scans were nothing, they didn't catch anything on any of my scans because my daughter is palate only, a cleft palate only. And so they didn't really catch anything, but we did go through that same process of them bringing that back. But that is really, I love that she called you the same day and she was able to like give you the space to like think about that. Do you feel like she was informed about like this at all? Or I guess what was her level of understanding of what this meant for you?
Yeah, no, she was great at like, she explained, breastfeeding a little bit. And she said like they didn't know, palate wise. And a lot of times they wouldn't know until after birth. She never said like my home birth or anything would be affected by that. She, I think, had 1 or 2 other births she had attended, which the baby was born cleft lip or cleft palate. So this wasn't like new for her. She did know about it.
Wow. I love that because I feel like a lot of people's experiences, since I found out at like after she was born, it was just, I don't know. All right, good luck. And so everyone there, they just weren't like prepared for that. And so I think that is like a wonderful thing that not only she had experience with this, but that you knew ahead of time so that you can prepare yourself. And then also she was like informed to guide you, to provide you some guidance and maybe even a little bit of peace throughout that entire process. Yeah. And so after you learned about the cleft, I know you mentioned that it was pretty much business as usual. Was there anything else that was like different or about delivering the baby or about your birth plan?
That's a loaded question. My 3rd birth was very much off the plan as it could be. We definitely were shooting for a home birth. I had some high risk things that came up, like they were concerned about her weight and some possible like heart issues. So they sent me to another doctor in hospital, and my midwife was like in connection with that hospital. So she was like talking back and forth, and thankfully like weight and everything resolved, like even the heart issue. They just had like date wise off a little bit. So they're like, oh, she's small based on this date, but not on this. It was anyway, dating I was 35 weeks. Yeah, I was like 34 and a half, 35 weeks. And I woke up one morning bleeding. And so I called my midwife and she said, you need to get to the hospital. And it wasn't like a ton at the time. But then like on the way, I started cramping. And so I was like, yeah, I definitely need to be here. I was in the hospital for 9 days with chronic placental abruption. So my placenta was like slowly detaching. They monitored me. I was in the hospital constantly, nurses in and out watching me. And thankfully the bleeding slowed enough where they were like, you can go home now. And so I was like, great. So I went home and me and my husband had a date that night. And the next afternoon, my husband's, oh, we go back to work. And my mother-in-law was in town, and I remember standing up and my water just breaking.
Oh my goodness.
I called my husband. I'm like, you need to come back home.
Yeah.
So he came back home, quickly packed. We couldn't have a home birth just because of when I was early. I was about 36 weeks at that point. And then I was also considered like high risk because of placental abruption. And my midwife said, like, with the contraction, the placenta could then basically detach fully, and then that can be an emergency situation. So it was just like it's best for this birth, which is fine. I did have one home birth, and it was a great experience.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then she came super fast, and delivery was like super chill. Like the nurse was like about to call the doctors in, and the doctor was like, didn't even make it in. The nurse had to catch the baby. So yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. That something similar happened to me. No, not the water breaking thing. I wish I was in labor for a really long time, and it was just really painful. And I watched all the videos and I did all of the things, and I feel like no one can prepare you for birth. It's like one of those things that you have to really experience and for yourself. And yeah, I finally was giving birth, and then I think that my midwife was at another birth, like down the hall. And, the nurses were coaching me through everything, and I was ready. Like, she was like crowning. And so they're like, yeah, go, call the midwife. And she's stop pushing, don't push. And I'm like, what? No, I'm so ready for this baby to come out. Like, in this, like, she's in this phase of being in and out, and it's just like torture. So it's the weirdest thing. Yeah. But I was going to ask that too, if you were able to have an at-home birth with your previous children. And so I've wanted to do something like that, but I just got so scared that, I don't know, of the unknown, right? Like of just them coming out and, I don't know, having to be rushed somewhere. It's just, yeah. So this is off topic, but what was that experience like? And was that your second born?
Yeah, my second born was a home birth. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it would definitely.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say it definitely was like a lot. So my first was a very traumatic hospital birth. It was also during COVID. So like that in itself was just a lot. But my second home birth was the most peaceful and relaxed I've ever been. And after that, I was like, oh, home births all the way. And like, yeah, my midwife is very equipped. Like she comes with different things. Like she even has medicine on hand if things. She's prepared for like hemorrhaging or anything like that. So we lived very close to a hospital, so I wasn't too worried.
Yeah, I think that's important too. Like I live in like a rural area, and so getting somewhere like quickly, I can get places quickly, but it's just not quick enough for me. But yeah, that's such a beautiful thing to experience. And so when you learned about your baby's cleft, did that come as like a total shock to you, or had you had experience, or what did you know about clefts before your experience?
Yeah, so my uncle had one, and like my great uncle. So like I knew a little bit, but like I'm not super close with him, so I just knew he had that. I think he had both as a baby. But then again, he's in his like 70s, 60s, 70s. That was a long time ago when things were very different. And so I knew a little bit about it, but again, I didn't know a ton. I didn't know what it looked like to have a child like that. I didn't know surgery wise. Like I didn't really know much other than like I knew what a cleft lip looked like.
Did you do genetics at all, or did you want to do that because you knew you had something in your family? Did you want to do genetics at all?
No, just because like they were like, it can be, they said there was a lot of risk with genetic testing. And I was like, it's not worth it. This baby, it doesn't affect, she already has a cleft lip. It's not going to affect us not wanting her or anything. We still love her and want her as she is. And so I didn't really see a point at that time.
I can totally see that and understand that. I think a lot of people don't want to take that risk while the baby is in the womb, at least. And so waiting to see the way that your baby's development progresses, if you wanted to do that, would be an option for later on. Has your baby had her repair yet?
Yeah, she has.
Oh, okay. Did you breastfeed before repair?
Yes and no. Um,
Okay.
before repair, it was a little hard. So basically, when she was born, she did latch right away. And because she was born early, she did struggle to basically stay awake at the breast, which was hard. Basically, I was exclusively pumping and feeding her with a bottle just to try to get her up to weight and whatever. And they said I could try to breastfeed, but at that point we had already seen the orthodontist for like her device, and that has to be in 24/7 except when you're cleaning it. And so at that point I couldn't breastfeed with the device, and so breastfeeding just point wasn't really an option.
I saw a post recently about this as well, and I'll actually pull it up. It says, from what I've learned, breastfeeding is not possible with a NAM. Our MFM has given us some reason to believe our little boy's palate might be intact, although we know this isn't definitive until he's here. So the question basically is it true that you can't breastfeed with a NAM? And is there no other workaround for that? So my question is, the orthodontist, did they tell you, hey, you won't be able to breastfeed with this? Or did they say during the feedings you can remove it? What type of support did you receive about that?
Yeah, so basically how it's in is it's taped in, and it would take us about 20 minutes for taking it off and putting it back in, like after cleaning it, like 25 minutes. So like to do that, every 2 hours is really extreme and a lot more stress. And to leave it in, she said, you could try and breastfeed, but it might be really painful or uncomfortable for you. And who knows how she'll do. So like at that point, I didn't really even try because it's like, I don't know if you've ever seen like a retainer. It's like that hard dental stuff that they put in. So
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So when you went in, when you first found out that she was going to have a cleft, did you go in thinking and like wanting to still attempt to breastfeed?
yeah, because my midwife had said like, we don't know how severe it is because sometimes less severe, they don't necessarily need the NAM device. And that means, they'll still have the lip repair surgery eventually, but breastfeeding is more of an option. You just don't know until the baby is born, like how severe, how anything's really going to work.
Yeah, for sure. I notice in groups, like sometimes people give definitive answers, and I always say, I'm like, yeah, I know I'm 80% sure how to answer this question, but you really don't know until your baby gets here. And of course, like for me, because my daughter is palate affected, that really wasn't an option for me. I tried to breastfeed her before I knew what it all meant for her to be cleft affected. And of course, since it was a surprise, the medical professionals around me did not know what that meant for her either. And so I was trying to get her to latch and stuff. And yeah, that just wasn't a possibility for her. And I learned that really quickly. Not really quickly, but I learned that after we spoke to the feeding therapist, that wasn't going to be an option for her because of the suction. But I think that some people don't quite understand, especially in the beginning when people are learning, that if your child has palate involvement, which you won't know until they're born, it is nearly impossible for them to breastfeed. Now, if your child is lip affected only, you do have the option to breastfeed. And I've seen many people attempt to breastfeed and also are successful at breastfeeding. And so I have been pretty amazed at like seeing all of the mothers give different tips. But again, it depends on your child. It depends on the situation that you have. You may choose to do NAM. Your child's cleft may be like really wide, and that may not be an option for them as well. But it's really hard to come to grips with that. That may not be an option for you. Did you breastfeed your 2 other children?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. And was it a little challenging, or did you grieve that not being able to do that right away with your baby girl?
I think I did. And I think even like when we were told the news, like even grieving, oh, breastfeeding and that journey might look really differently. And honestly, just grieving everything because everything was going to look differently than I thought it was going to.
Yeah.
And yeah, just putting my expectations and everything I had thought I knew about babies and everything just aside.
Okay. After surgery, you said you did attempt to breastfeed and you were able to do that a little bit, or no?
Yeah, so after surgery, yes and no. The lactation consultants in the hospital, the lactations in the hospital aren't really helpful. And I think I have my theories on that, but I had gotten bad advice. And so it was just making me very frustrated, making her very frustrated. They had just basically given me a nipple shield and was like, go at it. If she gets frustrated, just stop. And I was
Yeah.
like, that's so not helpful. And they like had told me to increase her like bottle nipple size. And so I was exclusively pumping, and basically that just made her want to eat. She was drinking so fast that it made my supply like not able to keep up with her. And I was finally like, I need to see a lactation consultant outside of the hospital to like address this issue, because surely I don't really know. My supply should be keeping up with her, even if I'm exclusively pumping.
Mhm.
So I did that. We're still seeing a lactation consultant. Unfortunately, it's not as easy as hospitals or doctors will tell you. They'll say, oh, after lip surgery, you can just breastfeed. And that is not the case. So not to be a discouragement, but also realistically, like your child from birth, Palate or whatever, has been like taking a bottle. So even after repair, they're used to the texture and the flow of a bottle, whereas a nipple doesn't feel like a bottle nipple. And the flow, like breastfeeding's flow, is very different from a bottle's flow.
Yes, for sure. I'm thinking about, so my daughter used the pigeon
Yeah.
and that thing like squirts
Yeah.
fast. And so I can't imagine having the same flow as that.
Yeah.
So it is definitely different. I love that you're sharing about managing expectations, because I think that a lot of people fear like being like the downer or like the bearer of bad news, but I think it's really important for mothers to understand that they have to manage their expectations with all of this stuff. You may have a baby that latches perfectly, right? You may have a baby that doesn't and that struggles a little bit, and all of that is okay. And it's certainly something that I empathize with people. I empathize with those mothers that can't get their babies to latch, but also if you get that in your mind, that there's a possibility that you won't be able to breastfeed, and so that you be okay with that and talk yourself down a little bit for not being able to have that experience. Okay. So we talked about breastfeeding at length. Now I want to talk a little bit about her surgery. So how old was she when she had her surgery?
4 months.
4 months. Okay. And so how was that journey? Were you able to get her an appointment scheduled right away? What did that treatment plan look like for you all?
Yeah, so we have one of the best teams in America, actually, where we're located. And so they were like, yeah, you're like in the perfect spot. Like people either go to Wisconsin or Florida, I guess, for cleft repairs. So we were very blessed with a very skilled surgeon. And so we got in right away. He even had connections to the orthodontist, and she works with the hospital. And so like everyone was connected. I think like the second appointment, he like looked at her and he was like, all right, let's get a surgery like scheduled and everything. And because she was preemie, she was a little bit older than he typically does his surgeries, and which was fine. But yes, it was very like scheduled. We arrived the day of, and it was I've gone through surgeries before, so like I didn't know what to expect. They walk in, they talk you through it. And now I guess they have this really cool, like where they're texting you from the operating room, which I had no idea. That was not a thing when I was a kid. And they even have like a whole digital board, like where they're like, oh, your daughter's in surgery, your daughter's in recovery rooms. Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I like totally bragged about that. It's if I can find any win in this, it's this thing is
Yes.
so cool. Like they're giving me like real time updates on that. But yeah, like during that day, did you feel any like grief at all about, oh, like I've known her this way for so long and now she's going to be different.
Yeah, I actually ended up writing something about it because I was like, I don't think, like, when you first find out, you start to grieve that, like, your child may not look normal or your journey will be different. But then if you find out early enough in your pregnancy, you realize that and you're like, okay, it's going to be okay. And then you meet your little baby and you're like, oh my gosh, I love them so much. And I love their face. Like you're just like, is so much in love. And then they like grow and you're like, okay, that surgery date's getting closer. And you don't really think much of it. You're like, but then the day of kind of hits and you're like, their face is going to change. And I've known this, like I saw scans of like my baby's face. So I have known her in the womb. And so I definitely thought of what is my child going to look like? And so like when we were walking down the hall to see her for the first time, like my heart was beating out of my chest. Like when like almost like a bride and groom, like when you're about to walk down the aisle, like you're just like so excited, but at the same time, you're like, oh my gosh, like what is it going to be like? So that's how I
Yes.
described it. But yeah, she was so beautiful. And I think not that I loved her more, but like just there's so much. I didn't think my heart could hold so much love. And yet,
Oh.
even after surgery, I was like, this precious little child, like I could never, oh, just love her so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I have heard so many stories about that initial like reaction and that like walking down the hall to go see your baby like right after recovery. And there's been a lot of like mixed feelings as well. Like I've heard of grief as well and just shocked, and even people share that they like don't recognize their baby too. They're like, who is this baby? Because they look so different, and the repair is just a necessary thing that they have to have. So do you feel like using the NAM device helped at all?
Yeah. Like so for example, her lip was really wide, but her nose was also very flat on one side. And so she ended up having a nose stint as well. And so like it really formed her nose really beautifully. And so when the surgeon went in there, he did a really good job.
Did you get that advice from the orthodontist to do the NAM, or was it just a part of whatever protocol that they have?
It was actually suggested by the surgeon just because with how flat her nose was, he suggested like we go with the nail.
I know that journey is really tough too. How have you been able to balance all of this? You have 3 children, and then on top of that, having the NAM journey, I feel like is a journey within itself because of those adjustments and things that you have to go through with that. How were you able to balance all of this?
It was a lot, but I think honestly, by God's grace, I don't, it's honestly where you're also like really, I had 3 under 3, so I was also very exhausted. So things were a blur, but I think by God's grace, it's just day by day kind of thing. And eventually we just somehow made it to surgery day.
Have things become a little bit easier now after surgery? And do you have any other future surgeries planned?
So yes and no. I know the orthodontist had said possibly jaw surgery and like teeth surgery or like more reconstructive surgery when she is older, which that is not something that is talked about. A lot of times it's just, oh, palate and they have a surgery and they're done. So that is more future, further out, 10 and up. And then maybe another nose surgery to repair that again. But as of right now, like nothing is on the calendar.
I feel like that's so true. There's this like gap where people are like focused on lip and palate surgery, right? Lip first, everyone is so like narrows in on that. And then usually when they're older, they'll do palate repair. And then there's this big gap to when they're from 8 to 10 years old, they have to have this bone graft if they have a gum notch. And so I think that can be a little bit challenging and a little bit isolating for some parents, because at this point, you think 8 or 10 years old, your child knows and understands pain in a different way or anticipating this thing in their lives. And yeah, I think that there's a lot of focus on the babies. And then when these school children have these surgeries and stuff like that, it's something that we don't talk about a lot. And that's interesting. Maybe I will have someone that is either like post-op for bone graft, or they're just now reaching that, to gauge how those moms are feeling, because you think about your baby girl now, right? 8 or 10 years from now, we're probably both going to be different people from them.
Yeah,
then. And yeah, it's tough to think about. Yeah. What do you think is something else that you wish people knew about children with cleft lip and palate in general?
It's a good question. I feel like a lot of people are like very scared or fearful of the unknown. But I think there's just so much, at least in this journey with our daughter, it's like there's so much grace with it. And you're not going to be perfect as a parent. Like, for example, like if there was a day that we would forget to change her NAM out or clean it, we would go in and the orthodontist would notice and she'd be like, it's okay. Like, it's totally fine. You have, 2 other kids. So like there was a lot of grace. And I think give yourself a lot of grace as a parent, and have a lot of grace for your kid, obviously.
Yeah. I think seeking like professionals or cleft teams that really care too about the whole family. One of my favorite episodes that we recorded is with the pediatric dentist, and she'd mentioned that her favorite part of the journey is having mothers come in to the office. And the reason being is because they can see other children and other families that are there for the same exact reason. And they're there seeing them in the lobby. And when you start the NAM journey, it can be really difficult to accept, but then also just challenging having to do all this additional work. And she says, did you see that mom in the lobby? That's going to be you in a few months, right? You're going to be like knowing exactly how to clean this thing and put it in and taking it out. And it's going to be like clockwork to you. And all of this is just like a blimp, right? Like a blip in time, and it goes by. While you're in it, it doesn't feel like it. But when it's done it's done. And so I thought that was telling. Yeah, not telling. I thought it was so interesting to hear that, because that is so true. Being able to see that experience is wonderful. It's insightful. It allows you to feel like you're not alone. And if she can do it, then I can do it, right? Like I can do all things. What do you think has been the hardest part of your journey?
I think just not really having anyone to talk to about it. Like there's no one in our community that has dealt with this. A lot of times people are like, oh, my friend's cousin's sister's uncle, like way over, like way back, or they don't know somebody like directly, or if they do, they maybe don't know all the information or like everything that they went through. And so I think that was hard, because we had people at our church being like, oh, my daughter had heart surgery. And I was like, it's not really the same. Like, it is a surgery, but there's nothing to it's not really anything to compare it to, but it's also, we didn't have those community members that were going through
it. I felt very alone in the beginning as well. And I felt like really emotional to talk about it too. So that was the other thing. So I wanted to not feel alone, but I also didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's a wild journey, I feel like. I was looking up because I wanted to do like a Cleft Mom question of the week. Do you have any tips or tricks for exclusively pumping? So I know you attempted to do some nursing, but also pumping as well. And do you have any tips or tricks for that?
I have a station so we have like our bedroom, and our kids are not allowed in our bedroom. So that's like our safe space, like away from the kids. That was always like a nice, like I would go in the room and shut the door and just pump. And that was like a nice, like breather break. And I know a lot of like doctors or lactation consultants were like, oh, just like, do it in your living room, like around the kids, or just like breathe and settle down. Sometimes like That's not always easy to do. So sometimes just having a spot like away from family or kids or whatever. That was my best like pumping advice. It's honestly, it's been very brand new for me because I exclusively breastfed both my boys. And so this has also been a very big learning curve for me.
Are you still pumping
Yes,
now?
I am.
It's tough.
It is.
I give a huge shout out and love to you and those moms that are pumping. It is truly a labor of love. And yeah, but to echo what you said, I think also one of the things that was off-putting to me is maybe I'm just a messy person. I don't know. But I would like milk would be everywhere. Like it was, I loved when everything was in one spot. So I didn't have like all these parts everywhere and like dribbles. And it is a lot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I will say the saving grace is I think they've become more lenient on the rules on like how long breast milk is left out and all of that. And saying, I saw a bunch of moms being like, oh my gosh, I'm losing it because I'm sanitized the bottles every single time. And I'm like, it's okay. You don't have to do that. That's a lot. I haven't done, I'm not that extreme. Maybe I should be, maybe a little more extreme, but my baby survived. I'm like, you don't wash your boob every time you nurse. You're fine.
Yes. Yeah. No, and then I always tell people, I joke and say, I am not the mother I thought I was going to be because like I just allow her to do like the grossest things that I would never, before I was a mom, I would be mortified, like literally. And so, yeah, like I'm always like, when I say the things that I do out loud, I'm like, that is really gross and totally get it. But yeah, like imagine sanitizing every single time. My God, like that's a lot. It is a lot. And even if you want to do something like that, yeah, if you want to be that kind of mom, totally, like kudos to you. But give yourself some grace if you miss a day or if you forget something. This journey is really hard. And yeah, so I guess in closing, if you can add anything as well that you maybe wanted to share during our conversation today, but what's the biggest lesson that you've learned along your journey, or what is like the best advice that you have for a mom in general? You have 3, so you're like really experienced.
Yeah, it was basically just like what I said earlier is there's a lot of grace. And I think honestly, personally, I'm a Christian, so that is my biggest grace was like those little moments of like prayer or just whatever it is, meditation. For me, it was prayer and just like sitting and being quiet and taking that time to breathe because as women, I think we rush around a lot and we don't breathe. And so that was finding those little pockets of breathing or even while pumping, just like closing my eyes and just like breathing. And not watching TV, not reading, just like stopping and just, there it is.
Yeah, that's so true because I often, whenever I have a moment like that where it's like to myself, I always say I'm also a Christian. And so I always tell myself and I pray to God and I'm just like, thank you for this moment to be able to pray because there's a lot of noise all the time. Yeah. And so just even now, putting my daughter to sleep at night, and we have the same routine every night. She gets a bath, and she gets a cup of warm milk, and we just sit in the rocking chair until she's done with the milk, and she puts it away. But as we're sitting in the rocking chair, and I'm waiting for her to eventually say she's ready to get into her crib, I'm always able to have that moment to pray and to pray for her and to pray for our family. And so that's a really special thing, I feel like. Yeah. So if you're a Christian or whatever religion you follow, just allow yourself to have connection and to breathe and to give yourself some grace that we all need. Yeah. But thank you, Aliese, for joining me today. And thank you all for listening to the Our Forever Smiles Cleft Mom Diaries and Support podcast. Be sure to subscribe and submit a review of the podcast wherever you listen. I hope that you've enjoyed this audio experience. Maybe you cried a little, laughed a little, but more importantly, I hope that you feel a little piece of reassurance and even joy in your journey. Talk to you next week.